Even though Left 4 Dead employs tons of dark, apocalyptic imagery, it's not a horror game, nor does it pretend to be. Instead, it's an action series that has a lot to teach us about how to effectively design a game. So grab your auto shotgun and a spare medkit, because first in this two-part video series, we're looking at Left 4 Dead's enemy design. I recently got back into Left 4 Dead and its sequel to grab footage for my video about the worrying impermanence of digital gaming, and I have not been able to stop playing these games in my spare time. And at the end of the day, that's because the Left 4 Dead games are addictive for all the right reasons. If you haven't played, Left 4 Dead takes your traditional zombie tropes, downplays the heart-wrenching drama of watching civilization crumble, does away with the factions of survivors who would just as soon kill you for your gear as look at you, and plays up being a band of badasses cleaving your way through an undead world. Unlike games where dying from a single bite and losing the character is a real possibility, the regular zombies in Left 4 Dead are not much of a threat individually. It's your job as survivors to stick together and keep them that way. The infected will charge from all sides, emerge from dark corners, and occasionally swarm you like a horde of flesh-eating locusts. But if you and your teammates have each other's back, you'll fend them off without too much trouble. But the game's challenge is designed around your willingness to be a team player and be aware of your surroundings. To that end, we have the Special Infected, more powerful zombies that in effect exist to force you to adapt to the game's survival calculus. In other words, don't split up, keep alert, check your corners, and don't blindly rush ahead. In the original game, each of the Special Infected play a specific role. Sure, there's the surface context, where they all have to look interesting and unique, and they all have to be different enough from each other in terms of sound and appearance that you can identify them just from the little musical motif that plays when one spawns. Those little motifs are important because in the multiplayer component, you have to be able to identify each special enemy by sound alone, even if your group is on voice chat, at least if you don't have subtitles on. Like I said, Left 4 Dead is not a horror game per se. It's an action game with horror aesthetics, and the sound design is a good example. Where a horror game might engineer its sound to create a perpetual atmosphere of dread or tension, Left 4 Dead's sound cues are meant to be distinct enough that you can immediately gauge the situation and prepare yourself. You hear that boomer motif, and you're going to be peering around corners ready to shove one of those big boys away rather than mindlessly fire away. You hear the theme of an incoming horde. And you're immediately going to be casing the joint for a good defensible spot to hunker down till it's over. You hear the tank theme. You tense up, you become hyper alert, and you prepare to fight for your life. And in case you're wondering, the subtitles do give you the same alerts as the sound cues do, in case you're hard of hearing or you're playing on a group chat and everyone's talking over the game. But by the time you're old hat at the game, these reactions become second nature, they happen on a dime, and they become another part of the game's ebb and flow instead of a mere reaction to it. But each of the Special Infected fills a niche that the others do not. We can sort the Special Infected into 4 broad interconnected categories: those who separate, those who pin down, those who discombobulate, and those who change the game. The Hunter and the Smoker both pin you down once they grab you, dealing damage until you're dead unless your teammates kill them or use a melee attack to break you free. But their methods of attack are equal and opposite. The Hunter pounces right on you and begins immediately dealing damage, while the Smoker tags you with his long tongue and drags you away. It's not really tongue, it's actually his intestines, because this is still a friggin' zombie game, not Yoshi's Island, but sure, call it a tongue. You don't take damage until he drags you back, but it can take longer for your teammates to save you because the Smoker separates you instead of just jumping right into the fray. So it's a trade-off, both for the survivors and in versus mode for the Special Infected players. Both the Smoker and Hunter perfectly exemplify the game's focus on teamwork. Once you get pounced or ensnared, unless you can kill the Smoker right when he starts to drag you, there is literally no way for you to free yourself without a little help from your friends. It's a great way to reinforce the intended playstyle through design, because if you try to just lone wolf it, you're gonna have a bad time. So when you're on expert mode and all your teammates are dead, you're running to the safe room and suddenly you hear the scream of a hunter, well, now it's starting to feel like a horror game. The Boomer, on the other hand, discombobulates by puking on you, washing your vision in green gunk and summoning a horde. But to balance this, no damage is dealt by the puke itself, nor are your movements impaired, only your vision. But pair this with a well-timed Hunter Pounce or Smoker Strike, and someone could take a catastrophic amount of damage before they get rescued. Consider the Witch. On one hand, hearing her cry is quite literally a game changer, because all of a sudden you can no longer fire indiscriminately. You need to move gingerly and quickly once you find her, unless you want to take the chance of trying to kill her. If you startle her, she'll run at whichever survivor startled her, immediately incapacitate them, and slice them up until death. Unless you're on expert or realism mode, in which case the Witch kills you instantly. She's also agitated by light, so you need to turn your light off to stand a better chance of keeping your intestines where you want them. And that's the important takeaway here. The Witch is the biggest reason for you to be able to turn your light off. In these games, there's very little reason otherwise for you to turn your light off. Almost all of the first game, and about half of the second game, take place at night, and in all campaigns, you're running through dark buildings and peering around shadowy corridors. You want your light. In most cases, going without it would just be silly. And that's a great example of a control interface existing in a symbiotic relationship with the contents of the game. The tank is also a game changer, but instead of duping the Witch and forcing you to tread lightly, you have to go hard in the other direction when the tank comes. This big boy takes a village to bring down, and he can slap you across the room if he gets too close. And by the way, that's an instant incapacitation on expert mode. You've got to pull back and let rip with everything you got, and if there's a car between you and him, he can whip it at you for an instant incapacitation. You can probably guess why this tank is the most dangerous tank in the series, but I'll be talking about that level in the next video. So these two game changers are total opposites, changing the game in radically different ways. Of course, you can kite a tank if he's somewhere inconvenient, but occasionally a Witch will spawn somewhere that'll make you a little salty. The second game brings us the Spitter, the Charger, and the Jockey. Both the Charger and the Jockey deal constant damage once they've got you, but the Charger pins you down whenever it hits a wall with you in tow, while the Jockey runs riot with you. So these guys add to the equation without breaking it or being too redundant. Tanks and Witches are game changers. Smokers both separate and pin down if you don't kill them fast enough. Boomers discombobulate, and Jockeys and Chargers both separate in different ways. Spitters are an interesting addition in the sequel. Jockeys and Chargers fulfill a similar role as the Smoker's Tongue, in that it separates one survivor from the pack and deals damage all the while. But the way the Spitter's acid spit forces survivors to move from their cozy, defensible corner, especially during a horde, can be considered a discombobulation move. But in a different way than a Boomer, because the acid spit does deal constant damage until you get out of it, but you're otherwise not impaired. Great care was taken to make sure that every special infected brought something unique to the table, even if it performs similarly on the surface to another enemy on our little Venn diagram of Left 4 Dead enemy types. Oh right, there's also the Fallen Survivors in the Passing DLC of Left 4 Dead 2. These guys are kinda neat. They're meant to be former survivors who got killed and reanimated. They don't really attack you in my experience, they just run away, almost like they're just baiting you to kill them. When they die, they drop cool stuff like medkits and Molotovs. It's almost like they're holding on to enough of their humanity to recognize who you are and want to help you. As for which special infected is the most dangerous to the average player, excluding the game changers, it's very situational, which is again one of the best parts of the Left 4 Dead experience, and a testament to the game's balance. On expert mode, just about any special infected can ruin your day, or any half-decent horde of regular infected for that matter, so let's think about it in terms of a more casual playthrough on normal difficulty. The Charger can absolutely graduate from separator to game changer in any high area with a place to drop down. Check out this action from the bridge finale of The Parish, where I was lucky enough to be recording when a Charger struck out of nowhere, killing Nick instantly by knocking him off the bridge. I also had Coach die once within the first minute of Dead Center in the exact same way.
It's not even fair. I'm calling zombie bullshit on that, you know?
It's alright, Zoe, but the point of the special infected is that their individual abilities work in harmony with each other. They've already got their apocalypse game on lock, and you as survivors have to work just as tightly to survive. And the big drawback for the Special Infected is that outside of the game changers, they're not very durable. The spinner is basically made of glass, and the jockey usually dies before characters even finish reacting to it, but there will always be more of them if the director wants it. Oh yeah, I had some back and forth with myself as to whether to consider the director an enemy or not. We call it the director, but really it's just the algorithm that semi-randomizes each campaign, deciding the placement of weapons, items, and zombies, and spawning in the Special Infected, and creating peaks and valleys. Like, if you've just been through a massive horde battle and you're limping on, maybe the director will give you less to worry about for a couple minutes, let you catch your breath. Or vice versa, like when a tank spawns in front of some cars. But the way in which the director works is heavily tied up in with the level design itself, so I'll save the talk of this mysterious entity for the second part of this video series, which will discuss the levels themselves. But that balance between the enemy types is a key element to good design in a combative game like this, where you're mowing down hordes of minor enemies, punctuated by more threatening foes to really put you on notice, or really in any game that involves fighting enemies. Tons of games, tons of good games, design enemies on a sliding scale from less powerful to more powerful, and that's not a bad thing, and some of those games can be masterclasses of design in their own ways. But I think it's really worth pointing out the downright mathematical nature of Left 4 Dead's enemies. It's like an equation, how each enemy type reinforces the others so that the game can properly curate the experience it wants to present. Pretty recently, a YouTuber by the name of The Democracy did a full playthrough of God of War Ascension, and one of his big complaints about that game was that the common enemies were all damage sponges even on normal, and it made me think about how in Left 4 Dead, even just being able to kill the normal zombies in 1 or 2 shots is more satisfying than if all the enemies were bullet sinks. And that's just your body chemistry at work. You feel like you're making progress when you blow through enemies so easily, even if there's a ton more to fight, so you get more of that sweet, sweet dopamine. So wait, when I called Left 4 Dead addictive, I actually meant it in the literal medical sense? Christ. But this is actually a good use of controlled dopamine bursts because it enhances the fun factor and nothing more. It's nothing like those freemium mobile games that weaponize that shit to get you to spend $1,000 on in-game purchases. But with the standard zombies littered all through the levels in a generally unpredictable way, it always keeps you on your toes. These are not games where you can safely coast because you think you know what's coming, and that's good. The enemy placement keeps you an alert participant instead of a glorified passive observer in the game you're supposed to be invested in. Just as a minor note, the second game also introduces a middle ground between the standard and Special Infected. These stage-themed zombies don't shake up the game in a big way, but they do just spice things up. Like these hazmat zombies immune to fire, or these riot suit zombies, spin them around and shoot them in the back. So long as you stick together and keep alert, there's nothing here that'll really just utterly tear you down and ruin your day like the bears in Skyrim or the cougars in Red Dead Redemption. Except on Expert, in which case everything could be that unless you play well enough that you should be getting paid for it, but that's kind of the point of Expert. I know I haven't touched much on Versus Mode, where one team plays as the Special Infected, but that's just because I don't have much experience with that mode. It'd be dishonest of me to start talking about that and present myself as some kind of authority on Versus Mode. This video is more intended to touch on the Special Infected in their capacity as CPU enemies. And to that end, the Special Infected work as exemplary enemies for all the right reasons. Not even Francis could hate that. Next time, we'll be looking at the other half of the puzzle, the level design. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you want more, check out my website for plenty of text articles on games, film, and more, link in the description below. And if you want something a bit more fictional, it also has links to my novels in physical and digital formats. I'll see you next time.